and Maggie Chrisman. My name is George Isaac, and this webinar will be in 3 or 4 different sections. And we will have time for a little Q&A after the 3rd section, and then also at the very end. I'll turn this over to Jessica Weidenfeld for background now.
Okay, thank you, George. So why do we need a Delta Science Tracker? The Delta is home to many environmental and scientific projects, each led by different organizations with their own unique approaches. While these individual efforts are very important, they often don't address the larger, overarching grand challenges that require collaboration and coordination across the board. According to the Delta Cross-Cut Budget Report released in 2022, over $116 million was spent by state and federal agencies on science expenditures. With this many efforts and so many different entities involved in them, it can be difficult and time-consuming to produce reports like this. And up until now, there has been no central location for helping to coordinate these activities, communicate their objectives, or share the progress and outcomes from the research. So this is where the Delta Science Tracker comes in. This tool was proposed by the Delta Science Plan to help fill these gaps. It's designed to give us a comprehensive view of the current and past science activities in the Delta and to aid in identifying opportunities for coordination and collaboration. So the ultimate goal of the tracker is to support the Delta Science Plan's vision of one Delta, one science, where the Delta science community works together to build a shared body of knowledge. Some of the goals of the tracker are establish an inventory of activities, track funding and progress, which can lead to enhanced accountability and transparency in how science funding is used. Another goal is to foster collaborations among scientists, researchers, and communities. And lastly, to communicate outcomes. The tracker is a platform that creates better access to project information generated by the activities. And you can think of the tracker as a one-stop shop for Delta Science. And although the tracker doesn't host environmental data itself, it does provide valuable insights into some key questions, such as what activities are being conducted or completed, who's working on what, where and when have these activities taken place, why are they happening, and what questions are they addressing, and how is the funding for these activities being distributed. And by answering these questions, the Delta Science Tracker gives us a way to better organize and integrate ongoing research, foster collaboration, and maintain the transparency that's so vital to all our work. And the tracker is a community resource. It is open to everyone, and there is no account needed to use the features. The only feature that is restricted is adding a project, and you will need to request an account to interact with the tracker that way. This tool is improved by people like you. We're seeking participation to grow our science project inventory, as well as obtain feedback from users to improve the functionality of the tracker. So although this is called the Delta Science Tracker, the scope of activities welcomed are broader than just the legal Delta. While it is focused on the Delta, the geographic limits aren't so strict. Anyone conducting research spanning the Delta watershed to the Bay can add their projects. Similarly, there are no time limits. We have focused our efforts on adding current or recent within the last 5 years projects to the Science Tracker, but there is no time limit preventing older projects from being added. When you're entering a project, there are several fields available to help you classify or tag your activity. If you see a topic or management area that needs additional consideration and there is no option to add the topic yourself, please reach out to us and we can help. The majority of the existing activities in the Science Tracker are from the Independent Science Board's Monitoring Enterprise Review inventory, and thus many pre-existing fields or tags in the Delta Science Tracker reflect the historical focus on biophysical science areas. But we want the Science Tracker to be inclusive of the broad range of activities related to Delta science, such as traditional knowledge and social science. And again, please reach out if you have feedback that can help us improve the Science Tracker in those areas. And before we start looking at the details of the science tracker, it's important to just take a minute and clarify the Delta Science Tracker, that it is meant to be a community-driven project. The Delta Science program staff lead and manage the website and inventory, and we've been adding projects, but we're looking to the whole broader Delta community to help us make this resource thorough and robust. Project leads and collaborators are being invited, and anyone who has not yet been invited can easily request an account so that their science project can be added. So now I'll pass it over to Maggie so she can talk about navigating and exploring the tracker functions.
Thanks, Jessica. So next slide. So now we're going to dive a little deeper into the science tracker to highlight its main features and some ways we designed it to be used. So I'll begin with a quick overview showing you ways to navigate around the site. So next slide. Again, the science tracker's main functions are intended to be openly available to anyone interested in obtaining information about science activities in and around the Delta. So as Jessica just said, most of the functionality of the tracker is available without requiring you to log in with an account or a password. The landing page shown here on the slide provides a number of ways to immediately start browsing through the inventory of projects using a variety of filtering options such as regions, management themes, organizations that are involved, or clicking along the top of the landing page, you'll see tabs that will let you jump into a larger filtering menu for activities, organizations, and people. Next slide. So the Science Tracker's main landing page also has a few different ways that it highlights recently added activities or when an activity page gets updated. So if you scroll through the landing page, you'll notice a couple sections. One has a rotating carousel that highlights featured projects. And then there's also a short feed that gets automatically updated as a project gets added or as a project gets updated. Next slide. Another really important page that we just added, and so I want to highlight it here, is a new Getting Started resource page. We've been working on this for a while, but it's accessible now from a tab at the top menu bar as illustrated. And as I said, this is brand new, so if you've visited the site previously, you probably haven't seen it yet. If you click on the Get Started tab, it'll take you to a page that has, this page is shown here, that has a number of resources for the science tracker, including helpful videos and documents like the glossary of terms that are used in all of our filtering options, a number of quick start guides, a detailed user guide, and a section that addresses frequently asked questions. Next slide. So to start exploring the inventory itself, and so all the activities that we currently have in the Delta Science Tracker, we recommend that you start off with the large search and filter options menu, and there's a couple different ways you can access this. One is to click in the top menu where it says Science Activities, and it's in the red circle here, or you can use the See Complete List link that's in the middle banner on the landing page. Either way, clicking on one of those two different links will take you to a more complete search and filter options menu that's shown on the next slide. And so from here, you can use a variety of different options to narrow down and find activities. And again, we have that glossary that will help you kind of understand what some of these terms mean. Most of them should be straightforward, but if you have any confusion, definitely check out the glossary. You also should note that there's a button circled in red down in the bottom right corner of this menu, and clicking that button that says download will export the list of activities that you find in any search to an Excel file, and it'll include all the details that you find on the activity pages in that Excel file. Note, this feature is currently only available to users that are logged in with an account, but we're currently actively updating the website so that this will change, and any user, you won't have to be logged in to be able to download the results of a search. So stay tuned for that to be implemented. Next slide. So to search, you can enter terms, or you can use a combination of the filter options to narrow down the inventory. For example, here I've typed in the words aquatic vegetation, submitted the query, and found that there are 26 activities associated with that topic in the science tracker. Clicking on one of the activities that's in the list underneath the search box will bring you to that activity's profile page. Next slide. So from there, you can find a description of the project, see photos if they've been added, and find a number of other details about the project. You can also use links located at the top of the page, just above that photo in this slide, to share the activity directly through social media outlets or via email. Activity pages are kind of the main components of this website. It's where you'll find the details of all the research and monitoring activities that are in the Science Tracker inventory. Next, I'll walk you through some of the information that you'll find on a typical activities page. So next slide. So each activity page has a section that shows you who and what institutions are associated with the activity. And I should pause here to say that we intentionally use the term collaborators for the section that lists people involved with the activity. This allows each project team the discretion to determine how much detail they want to include. There are different categories for these collaborators so that, for example, a principal investigator or a co-PI can be identified, as well as any other collaborators on the project, such as research partners that play various roles. You can also click on people's names or institutions to get a list of what else those people or institutions are working on or what they've worked on in the past. So for example, if I click on the UC Davis link here, it'll pop up with a list of activities that are associated with other UC Davis researchers. Clicking on the names of the collaborators themselves will also provide a similar type of list for those collaborators, as well as contact information if available. Next slide. Also on activity pages, there are sections for detailed funding information, including funding sources, award amounts, planned versus actual expenditures, and more. Projects can also describe if they were part of a particular funding call or funding program, such as our Delta Research Awards or Delta Science Fellows programs. And then last but not least, in fact, this is, in my opinion, in some ways, the most important, the Delta Science Tracker is intended to be a communication platform so that researchers can share and so that the rest of the community can easily locate and access information that's being generated through these activities. So one of the really important components of each profile page is a section towards the bottom where you can find links to products and outputs from the activities. These can be reports, publications, links to videos, blogs, news articles, or links to data repositories. We have some updates in the works for this section too to make it even better in the future, so we definitely invite you to stay tuned. And with this and with all the other features we're talking about today, I just want to repeat that we'd love any feedback you have because we're continuously looking to keep this tool relevant and useful to the whole community. So next slide. So changing gears a little bit, moving away from the activity profile pages, the next set of features I want to show are accessible from, again, another tab at the top of the website where it says visualizations. So next slide. So there's three kind of main types of built-in visualizations that the Science Tracker can generate itself on the website. You can quickly create some graphics that summarize the number of activities in various categories, such as the number of activities through time that have addressed particular science topics or management areas. You can also do a very similar type of plot looking at funding amounts versus various categories. And then finally, you can create network diagrams that help you visualize how many people or institutions are connected by various activities. For all of these types of visualizations, you can apply filters to narrow down the types of activities or the topics of interest. So a couple examples are in the next few slides. So this is an example of one of the network diagrams that the Science Tracker can produce. You can download data and images associated with each of these graphics too. You can see the buttons kind of at the bottom of this slide. And in the network diagrams, projects that are connecting organizations or people, this is an organization network diagram, but you can do a similar thing with people. But the projects in this network diagram are represented by lines, and then each organization is represented by a circle. And the size of either the lines or the circles indicates how many projects they have. So the thicker the line means the more projects that are connecting to these entities. In this example, UC Davis is that large circle kind of towards the left on the slide, and it has a lot of projects associated with it that are in the tracker at the moment, and thus it has a pretty large circle. If you hover on one of the lines, so in this is a screenshot, but you can see there's kind of a lighter blue line that connects Utah State University with Santa Clara University towards the right on the slide. And if you hover over one of the lines in the website, it will pop up with a list of projects that are actually connecting those two institutions. And then if you click on the link that pops up, you'll be able to directly go to that activity and check it out. So next slide. And then, so this is another example plot that shows how funding, in this case, between the years 2016 and 2022, were spent on different science action agenda areas and/or management needs. So you'll hear more about why this particular topic is of interest to us at the Council in the next part of the webinar. But as an example here, you can see that there was like a large increase in funding awards made in 2019. And that's associated with the competitive funding awards of the Delta Science Program that year, what we now refer to as our Delta Research Awards Program. But I want to pause and say that while these summaries are kind of fun to look at now and play with, they're based on a fairly limited set of projects that are currently in the inventory. So we are looking to grow this inventory so that these summaries can be more robust and informative. So we definitely want you to look at these tools, give us feedback, but also understand that any takeaways that you're making from these plots should be taken with it in mind that this is not a full set of projects for all things funded in the Delta yet. So this is a good point for us to now transition to the next portion of the webinar, where you're going to hear from another environmental scientist at the Delta Science Program, Kim Luke, about her work using the science tracker to assess the implementation status of the current 2022 to 2026 science action agenda.
Yeah, so the Science Action Agenda, or SAA, is a guide that prioritizes and aligns interdisciplinary science actions in the Delta to inform management decisions. It identifies and fills knowledge gaps, promotes collaborative science, and informs science investments. The most recent SAA, the 2022 to 2026, has 6 overarching management needs, and under those needs are 25 different prioritized science actions. And it's these science actions that research and projects in the Delta should be addressing. The science action priorities in the SAA are a distillation of input from scientists, managers, and stakeholders in academia, federal and state agencies, NGOs, and local/water agencies across the Delta. And as a result, the Delta Science Program and other agencies use the Science Action Agenda as a guide for science funding. Next slide. Oh, sorry, can I have the next slide? Thanks. So right now, we are working on a midpoint progress summary of the 2022-2026 SAA, and the summary will evaluate the progress of each of the 25 science actions and provide the following benefits. 1, it serves to document progress made on the SAA science actions and relevant activities. It also tracks the progress documented to help inform the response phase of identifying new actions for our next SAA. And finally, it offers a gauge of the return on investment from the Delta Science Program and its partners' funding efforts, which are guided by the SAA. Next slide. So how does this relate to the tracker, right? As Maggie and Jess have mentioned, we hope to have as many projects in the tracker as possible so that we really have the breadth and depth of work going on in the Delta. And this also helps us track the progress of the SAA. So in the tracker, when you're implementing a project, you have to select which science actions your work is supporting. So here I have a little screenshot of what you would see when you input your project, and you can select the different science actions that you are working towards. Next slide. So with that, we can download all this data off of the tracker and use it to evaluate the progress of each science action. So we can see things in the data such as how much money went into supporting a science action, what type of projects and products are going into each science action, and which science actions have progressed greatly and which ones still need more attention. And then I just have a little image of a figure here from the previous progress summary of the last SAA. And it just shows different activities that address different science actions. So again, the more projects we have in the tracker, the better our evaluation of the SAA is. So please add your projects if you have them. And with that, I will kick it back to George for the next slide.
Thank you, Kim. So we want to take a a small break here and pause to see if there are any questions that you need. As you can see, there's so many different functions and features of the tracker, and getting more and more projects into the tracker, I think, will really help to get the value of the tracker. And one of the big features of it is going through those search engines and, pinning it down to exactly the kind of information that people need. Especially managers and decision makers are looking into teasing out information that's of value for the monies that's being spent and the research being done in the Delta.
And I might
Take a
pop
couple.
on just to say that you stick around, or we can, if there aren't any questions at this moment, the next part of the webinar is going to do a quick walkthrough about adding a project, just kind of show you what it involves to add a project. So you can also save your questions for then if you prefer.
Yeah, we'll have the same slide up, and we'll have a time for Q&A at the end of the presentation also. So I will. We do see one question.
Yep. So there's a question in the chat that is asking, who is the primary person I should contact to discuss multiple contributions to the database? And I would say reach out to us. So the email sciencetracker@deltacouncil.ca.gov goes to our team. And so we'll be able to help you with that. But George Isaac is our main point of contact, but you can reach him through that email.
Yeah. Also, the website has a contact us tab on top, which also takes you to a window where you can email your requests and comments.
But we are happy to help, especially for programs that want to get a large number of projects in at once. We are definitely here to help with that.
Yeah.
So please reach out.
Since this is now, since the webinar started, and since we had a Bay Delta Science Conference last week, we've had a lot of interest in the Delta Science Tracker. So we've set up a series of office hours where you can contact us and we can help you and guide you through the process of either adding the tracker, adding a project to the tracker, or other questions that you might have. Seeing there are no other questions at this time, I will hand it.
A follow-up.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah, so there's no way in the system to do a bulk upload outside of, like, we can help with that, but you can't do that, a bulk upload separately. So yeah, definitely reach out to us and we can help with doing that. Thank you. Well, maybe we'll move on and I'll just walk through to show, because adding a project, I think it's kind of helpful to see some of the steps, and there might be some more questions after you see what that involves. So, we're, let me see. Let's go to the next slide. So it's intended to be a pretty straightforward process in terms of, and pretty painless, hopefully painless. We definitely had that in mind when we were developing the tool, that we didn't want this to be a significant burden to be adding a project. And so the steps that I'll walk you through kind of show you the basics of it. And to get into some more detail, you can ask some questions at the end, or definitely visit us during the office hours, or just reach out and we can set up a separate time too. So the first step, if you have an account and you're ready to log in and start contributing your own activities to the science tracker, you first start by clicking on the login button that's in the top right corner. Once logged in, you will come to a landing page or a welcome page that has a couple of links that are handy. One, it will immediately direct you to look out and check out the glossary that has descriptions of and kind of context for all of the terms that we use in the entry forms, which are also the same tags or filters that we use when kind of browsing through the inventory using the website. So there's a link right here to immediately jump off and add a new activity if you want. Or if you go to the next slide, the other way you can add a new activity is, or if you've already navigated past your welcome screen and you want to add an activity later, you can get to that by clicking on the science activities button at the top. Losing my words. So go to the next slide. It basically will take you to this main menu of where you're searching and filtering science activities. So if you get back to this menu, you'll see there's a button at the bottom left corner that says add new. And that's what you click on to add a new project. And when you do that, it'll take you to the beginning of the entry form. And there's a large number of entry fields that are possible on these in this entry form. So to start, you'll give your project a title and a description. These fields are required, which is denoted by the red asterisk. Again, there's a lot of fields. You don't have to enter all of them. There's just a few things that we require just so that, you know, there's a basic element of information for each activity in the tracker. If you click to the next slide. So further down the form, you'll see all these different descriptive fields. Again, these are basically what provides the information that's used when searching or filtering for projects. And so you can fill out things like the management themes, the science themes, or science topics that are involved. Many fields are required. Again, that's where the red asterisk comes into play, but you know, we are trying to balance the need for obtaining detailed descriptions with time associated with adding projects. You can skip any non-essential fields if desired. So the next slide. Guidance on how to enter information is available again in that glossary, but also it's included in descriptions next to form fields. You can also check out some of the fields have ways to add or get more information. So sometimes there'll be links to, so I didn't put an arrow by this one, but under the California subbasins options field, there's actually a link to a map where you can view a map and see what subbasin your project might fall in if you don't already know. Some of them, hopefully many of these are very self-explanatory. If you click to the next slide, the other thing that is an option for some of these fields. So some things have kind of pre-formed selections and some things you can actually add new options for. So for example, your organization, if your organization isn't already in the science tracker, you can easily add it and then it will pop up and autofill for the next time you go to add your project. You can also make multiple selections. So for example, in the bottom form field right there where you're looking at a science action agenda area, if you wanted to select multiple, you could do that by holding down the control button. All of these details are listed again in that guidance that's on the form itself. And then finally, the last step of entering a project, if you go to the next page, the very bottom, you have the option of either saving the activity as a draft or as fully publishing it. If you choose to publish it, the page will immediately be visible to anyone that goes to the science tracker page. It'll be listed in that new recently updated or recently published activities list. If you choose to save it as a draft, you will be the only one that's able to see it. But regardless of whichever option you select, when you hit save at the end of adding those details, the next slide shows you'll be taken to the activity page. And so this one is kind of empty because I just did like a quick little test to show you, to give an example of things, but there's a couple warning banners that will likely appear when you first do this. So if you've chosen to save the project as a draft, there will be a red bar at the top that warns you that this activity is not published, because otherwise you might not realize that this is still a draft. You might think everyone can see it, but you can't. So the red bar tells you whether or not this is published or just a draft. And then below that, when you first enter a project, you'll get a yellow banner that tells you that you still need to enter additional information for funding details, collaborators, and products or outputs. And that warning goes away as those fields get filled in. So to do that, you can either click on some of those tabs at the top, or the kind of preferred way is, go to the next slide. You can add collaborators and the other information by going to those sections on the activity page. And this is also how you'll edit them eventually too. So where it says collaborators circled in red, if you look to the right of it, there's an add button. When you click add, it'll take you to another entry field where you can type in a person's name. If they're already in the inventory that's in the tracker, it will autofill. So like if you're looking at me and I've already done some projects, my name will autofill as you start entering it, and you can just click me and then it's easy add. You can also say what role I play on the project. So I might be, an advisor, I might be the PI, etc. If you go to the next page, you'll see that this is a completed activity page, but this is what it will look like eventually as you add the person. And you can, again, go back and edit in time. So if something changes, if there's a new person, you can add a new person, you can remove people, you can change their role from investigators to advisors or whatever types of changes might be happening. Then on the next slide, a similar process happens for adding funding information. So funding information is kind of in the middle part of each activity page, but you'll see an add button, and you can add separately for different grants, different funding sources. You can add expenditures, and you can mark whether an expenditure is a planned expenditure or go back later and say this was an actual expenditure if you want to do that level of detail. The next page shows adding products and outputs. So this is kind of towards the bottom of the page, but you, again, similar type of thing. You'll see the section, you'll see a place to say add. Once that gets added, you can add links again to other websites with blogs or videos. You can upload reports, etc. If you go to the next page, you'll see kind of what the funding summary and products and outputs looks like on a completed page. And again, this might be, in this case, there's multiple contracts that were involved, which is why there's separate listings under the funding summary. And then there's a couple different products and outputs that have already been added. So that's pretty much it. So again, it can take, depending upon how much detail you get into for each project, it can take a little bit of time, but if you are really familiar and you have all of the information at your fingertips when you get started, it really should only take you, we're hoping it's more about like 15 minutes to really get the basic project up there. And then, in time, as you add details, it might take a bit longer, but it's meant to be pretty straightforward and seamless. So with that, if you go to the next slide, we just have the question slide repeated, but that's basically the end of this little short walkthrough for adding project summaries. Again, we invite you to participate, ask questions here today, visit us in our office hours that are coming up. You can get more details on how to join those office hours by visiting the Get Started page. We'll have the meeting links posted on that page so that that's where the most up-to-date information will be. Also invite you to reach out and just set up a meeting with us. We're happy to walk through things with you and help you with your programs, getting everything up.
Yeah, we'll give it a few minutes here for any questions that folks have. Also, just a reminder, just to make a quick note of those office hours in case you want to get in touch with us.
So we have a question in the chat. If someone has moved from one agency to another and they are a collaborator on a project with you, how does one update that organization information once their name has been previously inserted into the tracker? So in the tracker, you can go into the profile of that person and you can actually choose between, you can add multiple institutions for a person so that it can keep a record, so to speak, so for example, if I'm here at the Delta Stewardship Council now and I leave and I go to CDFW next, I can change my affiliation in the tracker and say I was a former employee of the Delta Stewardship Council and now I'm at CDFW. There is a little bit of a bug in the tracker that we're actively working on where we're trying to make sure that that is reflected accurately on each page. But it's definitely possible. We're capturing that in there right now to make sure that your affiliation is accurate and it reflects where you were at the time of the project. There is another question. Do you want me to read it, George, or do you want to?
Yeah, here's the next question. Does entering a non-published report in the tracker create DOI for that product to make it citable? We don't create DOIs for any of the projects coming in, but if it already has a DOI, it'll show up as you enter it in the products and outputs section. I'm not sure if I answered that question, but
it's a great suggestion. We've actually had someone suggest this. It would be a great feature to have. And so we have actually looked into it. It's a little bit complicated to get this set up to work right, where we could actually issue DUIs. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's definitely not something that happens right now. Maybe tracker 2.0. We'll have that feature. We would love to hear suggestions, though, for features that would be useful, because we are looking to continuously keep this tool growing and relevant.
yeah, all comments and suggestions, we will have a record of it when it comes to time and funding to get a next version out. We will be reviewing all of those so we can make it more valuable and more user-friendly. Next question is, can you discuss features about reminders to ensure project owners leads update their project regularly? This question has come up before, and currently we don't have that feature, but we have discussed this, and apparently that feature is something that others also have requested, and we are looking into how we can make that happen. But for example, a certain agency might want all of their project leads to have a reminder sent out every 3 months or every 6 months, and so we are considering that feature in the tracker. It doesn't have it right now. On the other hand, we internally here would have been discussing about reaching out to folks who haven't done any updates in the last 6 months to just send us friendly reminder, send out a mass email to the group of folks who have not updated it for about 5 or 6 months. But to have a feature that will automatically do that would also be nice, and we are thinking about that also. Thank you.
So, do you want me to get this one, George, or do you want?
Yeah. So the question is, if a PI leaves an agency before a project is completed, how can their account be transferred to the new PI? So that's a very straightforward process. We just have to know about it, and we can easily transfer it to another person's name, and that can be done, in a day's time with just a notification to our IT folks. Good question. I'm not seeing any more questions, Maggie. Yes.
Yeah,
We can wait for a few more minutes.
Happy to stay on.
Yeah.
But also happy, again, you can always follow up with us afterwards, set up a meeting with us during the office hours. We have a whole team ready to help get projects into this tracker. Well, thank you all for your time. We really hope you enjoyed and learned something new at this webinar today, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thanks for everyone who joined us.